morning, everyone. Welcome to the KittyHawk Investor Series. My name is Will Weisman. It is a great pleasure to have you all joining us today. On our call today, we have our LPs, the CEOs of our portfolio companies, advisors, and a few friends of the firm. So welcome. Great to have you all with us today. We're going to have a fascinating conversation about Web 3.0 and blockchain and Bitcoin and all the good stuff that's happening in the broader crypto world. I want to give you just a quick update on KittyHawk 3. We're in our final 2 weeks of before we close things down here. We just brought on our first institutional investor, which I'm really excited about, the New Mexico State Investment Council, which is the US's largest sovereign wealth fund. So really exciting step and excited to welcome them aboard. So if there's any of you out there that we've been talking and you're trying to figure out whether you're participating or not, we're going to be wrapping things up in the next 2 weeks. So we'd welcome the opportunity to connect with you if that is helpful. All right, so today we're going to be chatting with Anne Connelly. So I've known Anne since my early Singularity days and known her as someone who is passionate about harnessing blockchain to transform the lives of people, especially in emerging economies. Anne is faculty at Singularity University, where she focuses on teaching global leaders how exponential technologies can solve problems that impact billions of people. She's been an active part of the global blockchain community since its earliest days in 2012 and is the author of Bitcoin and the Future of Fundraising. Anne previously worked with the Canadian arm of Doctors Without Borders in Africa and served on their board of directors. She's a brilliant thinker with deep crypto expertise, and it's my great pleasure to have her joining us today. So Anne, welcome.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Great to see you again. So it seems like this crypto thing is really happening, and there seems to be a tremendous amount of excitement and energy and capital being devoted towards it. So I thought we might kind of start off by maybe framing things up for folks and just kind of giving a quick overview of kind of what you think are some of the most important kind of elements of this ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like you say, in the early days of crypto, when I was involved, I'd tell people I was working in Bitcoin and I'd get laughed at a little bit. And I don't get that anymore. It's great. People are more looking for advice on how to get in, which is exciting. But we've seen the space change a lot in the past year, especially. Things have really heated up with DeFi, with NFTs. We're getting into DAOs now. And I think what we're starting to see is really that transition from people looking beyond just Bitcoin and saying, okay, I get this cryptocurrency thing now at the most basic level. And now they're starting to dive deeper into blockchain, into decentralization, what that means for society, what that means for business, and are actually seeing what essentially decentralization is going to do to restructure the way we've built up everything around us. And I think that's where things are starting to get really exciting, is breaking down all of these foundational level infrastructure that we've built up, whether it be in banking or in supply chain or what have you, and starting from scratch with something that's much more blockchain based and much more equitable.
So maybe we'll just also kind of talk about, we were chatting at the beginning before things kicked off here, just the sheer size of what's at play here. So, I think crypto overall global crypto is like $2.4 trillion. Bitcoin being a little over $1 trillion now. So just huge dollars at work. And as you said, we're starting to see some of these decentralized businesses really come into their own and really start to present a real threat to some of the incumbent businesses and industries. And so love to talk to you about kind of where you think we're going to see some of the most, the largest impacts in the earliest days. Is it in DeFi? How do you see, maybe you talk a little bit about what DeFi is and the impact we're starting to see now.
Yeah, I think what's changed like in the past few months versus previously is a lot of the institutional players are now getting involved. And so that initial stigma around being in cryptocurrency has dropped. We're seeing a lot more traditional companies taking Bitcoin onto their portfolios as, a mix of what they're holding. But DeFi is where it's really getting exciting. And for those of you who are new to the space or new to that term, it stands for decentralized finance. And it's essentially, how do you, once you have Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, what can you do with those to essentially earn more money, or leverage that investment to bring in more revenue. And so there's a number of different things. You may have heard terms like yield farming, liquidity mining. These are all some of the things that you can do as a part of decentralized finance. But the key thing about that whole sector is essentially you can take a lot of the activities that you might have traditionally done in the financial sector, but do it without a centralized player in the middle. So if you're trading in a decentralized manner, peer-to-peer, without needing any type of stock exchange or any type of centralized broker in the center. And the same goes for, crypto-backed loans, that type of thing. And so what that's essentially doing is opening up this whole extra layer for people who are looking to make financial investments in the crypto space. It's not just about betting on this token or that token. You can say, well, okay, I'm all in on Ether, or I'm all in on Solana, or whatever it is. But even while holding that, I'm actually able to bring in significantly more yield while I wait for that other token to appreciate just on its own. And that's what's so exciting, I think, is just the mix of opportunities out there for people looking to make investments in the space, but also the ability to do it in a completely decentralized way.
And what's so fascinating, we led an investment into Figure, and so it was just they're basically DeFi right now, focused on HELOCs and on mortgages and leveraging the provenance blockchain. And so you see with some of these DeFi businesses, it's incredible kind of the acceleration that takes place in terms of how quickly transactions can happen, the costs that can be pulled out of those transactions, and that either turns into bringing down the cost of some of these things, or pushing out or increasing the profitability of these companies. And are you seeing that kind of systemically now in DeFi, or?
Yeah, I think that one of the greatest elements of DeFi that I think is not talked about enough is the accessibility factor. When you look at a lot of the people in my community who have massive stores of wealth, but it's all in crypto. Like if they wanted to go and get a traditional mortgage, they can't do that. The bank doesn't count their crypto as anything of value. And so if they don't want to sell those tokens because they know the value will appreciate, they really have no way to use that as collateral in the traditional system. And so with some of these DeFi applications, it enables people to use that crypto as collateral, keep the tokens, get the loan that they need to do whatever it is, whether it's buying houses or cars or whatever, and be able to participate in the financial system that they previously would have been excluded from. And so there's that angle. There's also the angle of now you've opened up this completely globally accessible financial system for people all over the world who may not have a good banking system that they can actually tap into. And so, we're seeing huge volumes in DeFi already. They're doing, goodness, like I can't even remember what the stats are, but we're talking about, billions of trades per day on these decentralized exchanges. And I think it's just going to grow from there because there's no permission needed to participate. Anyone can get involved, and it just requires a little bit of time, and that's about it.
How quickly do you think the DeFi becomes really fatal to the traditional kind of banking industry?
A lot of that's going to be,
it feels like it's happening. Like it doesn't feel too far away. I mean, I'm seeing some of these yields where you can earn close to 20% on your crypto in some of these places, and just banks cannot compete against that kind of yield or the speed or the economic efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, I was at my bank the other day and I was like, what are the rates on GICs these days, like a guaranteed investment certificate? And I can't even remember what he said. It was like 0.04 or something. And I just laughed and I'm like, there are extraordinarily safe investments in DeFi that'll yield between 4 and 11%. And there's like close to zero risk, as close to zero risk as you can get. And so I think that the barriers right now for DeFi really exploding are a couple. And first and foremost, it's education. It really, as soon as people can learn about this and try it out, they're going to be all over it, because when they realize the returns that are out there and the ease of access to those returns, it's a no-brainer. The second piece is internet access, really. And, these options are great for North Americans, Europeans. But, when you look at people in Southeast Asia and Latin America and Africa, once they're able to get consistent, electricity and internet connections, which is they're very close to having, this type of application and this type of ability to earn yields is going to absolutely explode. So those are, I think, two major pieces. And the last one is really just people getting familiar with the technology. And one of the ways that I love, and one of the things that's happening right now that I think is really going to drive that, is NFTs. Because if people are excited about buying, a picture of their favorite sports person or a piece of art that they think is cool or a crypto kitty, they'll learn about the wallet technology and the cryptocurrencies that they need to buy those. And that'll be their gateway into the other applications like decentralized finance.
Yeah, it's been extraordinary to see what's happened this last year with NFTs. I think there was something like 1.2 billion in volume in Q1, 1.3 billion in Q3, and then I think 10.7 billion in 1.2, 1.3, and then 10.7 in Q3. So just like crazy growth. And it's just amazing to see the energy that's happening, the creativity that's happening also. I mean, it's like the innovation that's taking place around this is just so spectacular. Do you think NFTs are here to stay? How do you think about some of the regulatory concerns that are happening around that as well?
NFTs are absolutely here to stay. I mean, they are going to change the way we interact socially and culturally in the same way that the iPhone did. It's just going to absolutely transform the way that we do things. I mean, on a most basic level, I was on a Zoom call the other day, and one of the speakers, she pulled her hair back and she said, "What do you think about my earrings?" And they weren't real. I had no idea. They looked real, but they were NFTs. And in a click of a mouse, it switched, and she was wearing a crown, and she had, all these different NFT pieces that she could wear on the Zoom call that she wouldn't be able to make that type of switch if she was on stage speaking at a conference. But where it gets really exciting is when you start to look at how NFTs essentially enable us to monetize digital products in a way that's never been possible before. And so we open up access to all of these worlds when you look at metaverses and the same type of posturing that you would do in your real life, wearing, branded clothing or unique pieces of jewelry or watches. That same type of posturing happens in these digital worlds. So the more time generations start to spend in these digital worlds, the more of these digital goods that they're going to want to be buying, and the authenticity of those is going to be important.
I think that's a really important point that I just wanted to draw out. I was on a call with Peter Diamandis yesterday, and he was talking about how he thought that people could spend up to 60% of their time in the metaverse, in these virtual worlds, in the not too distant future. And I don't know if that's the right number, but people are going to be spending kind of more and more time in these virtual worlds. And so the real estate, the clothing, like all your commerce, or so much of your commerce, will take place in the metaverse. And so this is a really critical piece of that, right?
Absolutely. And I think where it gets even more interesting is when you sort of decouple the idea that an NFT is just an art piece and realize that an NFT can represent anything. It can represent your house. It can represent, any physical good in the world. And then what you can then do with that NFT, for example, if it was a house or an apartment complex, you split the ownership of that NFT, say with a group of investors that you want to invest with, and just the potential for where all of that can go, both from a traceability perspective, but also access to investment, also, connections to decentralized identity, that type of thing. That's where everything really starts to explode. And so I would really look at kind of the art side and the collectible side of NFTs as just this very tiny entry point into a world where pretty much everything is able to be tracked and monetized in a whole new way.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that you can kind of apply these rules to a digital good and say, okay, when this changes hands, I want, the following 3 things to happen: these people to share in the revenue that comes out of the transaction, to be able to compensate creators for multiple transactions down the road. I mean, it's really this whole new reimagination of kind of what commerce looks like, and having, kind of smart contracts that are driving all the efforts, and no humans have to really be involved with it, which is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, and we're seeing all kinds of brands getting on board. I mean, Dolce & Gabbana did a huge launch recently. Playboy actually launched their own line of NFTs, I think this week. So the demand is there, both from the collector side and the consumer side, and brands are seeing that. And so it's really a matter of looking at NFTs, particularly in this kind of artistic sense, not as a new thing to buy and sell, but as a vehicle for culture moving forward. And I think if you can really understand that and understand, how the next generations interact with each other and how that culture is built and grown, that's where it all starts to really come together, and you can see the future value.
Are you investing into the NFT world?
I'm collecting. I wouldn't quite say I'm investing at this stage. I think I'm following a few different pieces. I have a moonshot bot, which I'm pretty excited about, and I've tried to bid on a few fun cartoon NFTs, but yeah, haven't quite got into the investment side. And I think it's an area I'm super curious about, and I really want to dive into. I mean, looking at what makes an NFT particularly valuable from an investment perspective. And that's where the community and the culture of the crypto world really comes into play, because the things that we value are just not the same things that a traditional art collector might value or a traditional investor might value. And so people are often surprised to see which collections go up in price and go up in desirability. And it really just goes to show that, for any brand getting out there, both from an investment side and an NFT creation side, you really have to know your market in terms of what makes crypto people tick, because it's not the usual factors.
Yeah, where do you think we are in terms of the development of this ecosystem, in terms of making it, easy for more kind of lay people to be able to tap in and participate in, whether it's investing in crypto or investing in NFTs? Are we still? Is it getting to the point now where the UI and the interfaces are becoming easy enough for people to easily kind of onboard into this world, and any places you might direct some of our participants today to, if they want to start checking stuff out?
It's getting a lot easier. I would say, I think some of the barriers to entry are still just a bit of stigma, a bit of fear and uncertainty, but there's a lot of educational materials online. If you haven't bought any cryptocurrency yet, I'll tweet out a link to a really easy to use guide. I think one of the barriers right now, particularly on the NFT side, is gas fees. So particularly on the Ethereum network, the gas fees to be able to mint and transfer NFTs are astronomical. And I think that's a massive barrier. It's fun when sort of wealthy.
Can you help people understand what a gas fee is? Maybe just a little more.
Yes.
No, thank you.
Sorry. So a gas fee is essentially like a transaction fee. And when you're just sending crypto from one place to another, if you're sending Ether, those fees are pretty low. Maybe it would be 50 cents or $1. But when you're actually doing a smart contract or something that involves a little more complexity, like creating an NFT, the amount of computation that's required to do that requires a higher fee. And right now the fees are very high. So to mint an NFT, you might be paying $150. So for someone who's just dabbling, that's a lot of money to be putting in. And so Ethereum right now is transferring from one consensus mechanism called proof of work to another one called proof of stake. And that's going to help with that. But I think at the end of the day, we need to be looking at, other ways to just reduce the cost for early entrants, and help them just be able to try things out, because that's often how people get involved, is just giving it a shot. But if you haven't bought yet, I definitely recommend it. I've got a guide that I'll tweet out, and then just head out, get some Ether, buy an NFT, see what it's like, and I think you'll really enjoy the collecting. It's a really fun element.
Amazing. How do you think about the future of fiat currencies, kind of given some of the digital currencies that are either stable coins or people deciding they want to hold their wealth in tokens like Bitcoin?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Bitcoin maximalists are really out to just abolish fiat currencies. They believe there shouldn't be any central government ever involved in that. That's not my view. My view fundamentally is that people deserve choice. And there's a lot of places around the world where people can't trust their government to manage their financial system. I mean, there's more than, I think it's 1.3 billion people that live in economies where they have double, triple, or quadruple digit inflation rates right now. And so, if you can't count on your life savings being there the next day, I don't think it's really fair that someone shouldn't be allowed to choose a different financial system if they want to. And so fundamentally, what I believe is that the rise of cryptocurrencies, whether it's Bitcoin or stable tokens or other options, will actually lead to an improvement in the quality of fiat currencies. Because if they know their citizens are going to have another choice, they're going to actually have to try and clean up their act a little bit and get their systems a little more stable. And so that's my hope. It's just that people have a choice.
That's very interesting. So kind of like more of really a marketplace that drives better, the result drives better behavior on behalf of the fiat currencies. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. What do you think about El Salvador, their move regarding Bitcoin? Is that, how seismic is that?
In some ways, so for those of you who don't know, El Salvador actually adopted Bitcoin as a national currency. And that's incredible in some ways. For many years, it was like, oh, nobody uses Bitcoin. Well, okay, a couple companies use Bitcoin, a few people use Bitcoin. I'm like, now we have national governments that are adopting this cryptocurrency. What I don't love about the mechanism that they chose to do that was they really forced it on everyone. They said every store, every person has to be able to accept Bitcoin. And that's not really within the ethos of how Bitcoin operates. We're not out there to force anybody to do anything. And so I think a better system would have been, hey, we're going to accept taxes in Bitcoin. We encourage everyone to use it. We'll give everyone, a free drop of Bitcoin if they're using it, or some sort of incentive system to encourage people to do it. But at the end of the day, it's a government that is providing their citizens with choice. And I think that's great. So I'm hoping to see other countries come on board. And hopefully that will also drive, traffic from international business to El Salvador, because they can do easier payments. And maybe tourism will come because they won't be having to, convert fiat all the time. So TBD on how that all rolls out. But I think it's a good sign.
Awesome. And I'd love to also talk a little bit about the regulatory issues surrounding this whole ecosystem. So we've all seen what's happened in China, with China essentially shutting down the use of the cryptocurrencies, the mining of cryptocurrencies, and I don't know how much wealth disappeared as a result of that, but very significant, or tried to kind of flee China. How do you think about that? At some point, do these currencies become so valuable that they become, maybe they become too valuable to fail, essentially, but they also, in many ways, kind of, I think, do pose a risk to these governments and their fiat currencies. And, we're also seeing regulatory concern around, or potential regulatory concern around, NFTs and what's happening. Are these securities, how they should be kind of managed? How do you think about this evolving regulatory framework and the risk that it applies potentially to this system?
Yeah, the first thing to know is China bans Bitcoin all the time. This is not the first time they've done this. It's probably the most extensive ban that's happened. Fundamentally, I think that's good for the Bitcoin network. It enables more of the mining power to be distributed around the world, which is generally a good thing. My view on it is any government that is outright banning it are probably the governments that have the most to lose from it actually getting rolled out. And so, when you look at China, they're implementing their own CDBC, central bank digital currency. And, Snowden once said, the beauty of blockchain is that everything's going to be tracked and traceable. The danger is whether that's going to be voluntary. And I think that's really, more than ever, we need to be pushing for cryptocurrencies where there is that privacy element, where governments can't be tracking literally every single transaction that you make. And, when we're in North America, Western Europe, it's kind of hard to understand why that's so important. But if you are in Afghanistan right now and you wanted to make a donation to a women's rights organization, and you knew that that was going to be traced by your government currency, or and they could come and arrest you and find you and kill you, having access to private money is extremely important. And so looking at China, I also look at this kind of angle of, how successful was banning weed in the US? Did it work? Did it stop the use of weed? It didn't, and so I think really governments that are progressive and want to actually improve their financial systems will look at crypto and say, hey, what are the benefits of using this? How can we actually make the financial system better for all of our citizens? by incorporating this in different ways. And that's what I'm really hoping to see is regulation that supports innovation and supports, whatever technology it is that will actually improve the lives of citizens as opposed to improve the power that the government has over the financial system.
Gotcha. Thank you. Fascinating. So one thing I'm kind of curious, I guess switching into an investor mindset here, I'm interested as to where you think we are kind of in the investing opportunity kind of life cycle. I mean, if this was a baseball game, are we in the first inning or are we in the seventh inning? And then I'd be also really interested to kind of think about or hear from you how you're thinking about where there might be interesting kind of emerging investing opportunities in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, it's still early days. Like when you think about global adoption, I mean, there's, hundreds of millions of people have Bitcoin wallets and are using it. But when you think about the volume of people that aren't, the volume of people across Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, et cetera, I mean, the growth there is astronomical. We're seeing huge rates of growth in Nigeria and Vietnam and South Africa. But it's early days, so when you start to look at, okay, what happens when global adoption happens, people start using Bitcoin as the default international payments tool, it's still very, very early. And it's all still very early. So that's, from a just buying and holding perspective, still early. And I can remember having this conversation with friends, talking about Ether. They were upset. Ether was at $60 and they didn't know if they should buy. And I said, listen, yes, it's the highest it's ever been, but I guarantee you, buy now, it'll drop by half. And then 2 years from now, you won't regret it. This is not investment advice, by the way. Buy what you want, when you want. But in terms of global adoption and just where the infrastructure is at and where things are going, it's very, very early. We're still talking about, when you look at the Ethereum sector, we've just started building layer 2, which is kind of when you're looking at the internet. We had the internet and then we had World Wide Web, which enabled everyone to actually interact with the internet in a meaningful way. Layer 2 is kind of that layer. And we're just starting to build out, whole suites of applications there. So there's the potential for this is astronomical. I think, as an investor, I would really be looking at, you look at your more sound portfolio where you look at more infrastructure tokens. You definitely want to be getting in on DeFi. You can look at liquidity pools, yield farming, that type of thing. Where stuff really starts to get exciting. I mean, you can get into NFTs from an art and collectibles perspective. I'd be looking at, digital real estate NFTs. But more importantly, I would be looking not only at what are you investing in, but how are you investing? And so start to look at decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, which are essentially collectives of investors that come together in a decentralized fashion to invest in different projects that are out there. And these could be anything. I was saying to Will earlier, there's a DAO that only invests in high fashion NFTs. There's DAOs that invest in research around psilocybin use for mental health. There's DAOs that invest in totally traditional tech companies. So it's not so much the what, it's the how. And what does that mean for your ability as, say, an ordinary person that might not have the ability to join a traditional VC to put, $5 or $10 every month into an investment vehicle? And then what does that mean for the investment industry as a whole when we've now opened up this potential for participation to a whole swath of the population that's been, traditionally been excluded? And I think that's where things start to get really exciting is, what does that mean for businesses and their ability to raise capital? What does that mean for really fringe niches that may not have been getting the attention that they were before? I think there's going to be huge amounts of capital available that weren't before, and that's going to cause real shifts in investments across the entire industry, both the new side of it and the traditional side.
And where can people actually go to invest in a DAO?
So DAOs they're all over the place. You'd have to essentially look for them by searching, what lists of DAOs that are out there. Everyone in crypto is on Twitter, and Twitter is really the best spot to be up to speed on what's happening. So I would start to look at hashtags around DAOs, start to read up blogs on DAOs, and some of them will start to come out of the woodwork. And if you're particularly interested in a particular niche, so maybe, you want to get into NFTs of sports figures or whatever, just start tweeting about it, start finding your community, and that's really how you'll get in. But they're all very organic. And if you don't find what you're looking for, I'd start one.
Go create one. I love it. I love it.